Hi, friends. Today, I want to talk with you about something that comes up a lot as I talk with clients and just other people about finances in general. And it's not a very popular topic or something that really drives a lot of people want to talk about, but it's very key, and that is liquidity. And it's a key component on building a stable financial base. And so I want to explain the concept to you, how we approach it, and how you can think about it in your own life. And if you're a business owner, for your business as well. So the first component is I want to just address what am I talking about with liquidity? I'm talking about your cash resources and investments that could very quickly be converted into cash. And so primarily what we're talking about is your savings account. And then in addition, as a second layer to that, and never to replace that, but in addition to that, sometimes we also have people with a brokerage account. So investments that are marketable securities could easily be sold and converted to cash in a short amount of time. And we'll talk more about how we approach the distinctions between those and the interplay between those in a few minutes. So, the first thing is, why is liquidity important? Because a lot of people say, hey, I want to get all my money to work. I want to put it someplace where it's going to grow the most, or invest it in a business, or something along those lines. And the reality is, liquidity is key for minimizing the risks you have in life from all the things that life throws at you. We all know that life doesn't go exactly as planned, but whenever we're talking about our own lives and the future, we assume that we have everything dialed in. And so it's easy to have a blind spot and not be realistic that at some point, something's going to happen. A car's going to break down or get wrecked. Somebody's going to end up getting sick, or you're going to have some repairs you need on your house, or the list goes on and on and on of the things that just take a little bit of extra money or impede your ability to earn money for hopefully a short amount of time. And there's different ways to mitigate long amount of times, and that's not the scope of this video. But as you know, and as you think about life, things come up all the time. And what happens if you don't have access to some cash that isn't already allocated is you're either pulling it from other things you need, or you're accumulating debt, or you're not paying your bills. And none of those things are good. And so sometimes I get this question from people as we identify the need for liquidity, and they say, well, isn't it just a waste to have cash sitting on the sidelines? I'd like that to be doing something. And sometimes they look towards like those brokerage accounts of like, let's just dump everything in there. And some of it can go in there, but not all of it. And the reality is that even if it's not earning as much as you might see it do if it's invested or in your retirement account or being dumped into your business, that cash is doing its job just sitting there. And it actually has a pretty significant return, even if you can't specifically identify it, because it's once again preventing those risks. And it's also what helps you sleep at night. I encounter a lot of people who end up in a cash crunch and they end up really, really stressed out about that. And that is hugely valuable in your ability to propel forward and grow throughout your life. So when we look at this, how does this functionally play out? I want to talk a little bit about the scenarios that I see where I see people short on cash and how that happens, because it's not generally actually from people being irresponsible or not paying attention to the important things. Oftentimes, it's the exact opposite. A lot of times, I see people who are saving really, really well for retirement, and they're just sure to allocate their money coming in a lot of different places, and they just haven't created a framework or a bucket for that liquidity. And so what this looks like is they might be saving a ton of money for retirement, but the problem is that if a challenge happens, that money's not really accessible. At least you don't want it to be. You could pull it out, but you're going to have penalties and extra taxes, and it's just not a good setup. And sometimes I'll even see people where they have a good emergency reserve, but nothing else. So they've got, maybe 1 to 3 months in their savings account, but then everything else is allocated with retirement accounts and rental properties and other things they have going on, and their risks have risen to a level that is more than this savings account over here, and they just need a little bit of extra. And that's where we really like to add in that brokerage account so they can get the growth and investment on that, but they still have access to capital if they need it. The other thing we'll see is people, sometimes money just there's a lot of things to do in life. There's a lot of things you want. And so it's easy to just have it be gone if it's not going somewhere really specific. You can't pull it out like the retirement account. And so in that case, this does take discipline to build up wealth. But I see people do it successfully all the time. It's just about building that framework and identifying really clearly what your goals are. And then, of course, people love to dump money into illiquid investments. And there's certainly a place for these. Can be great benefit into investing in things like real estate rentals. But not only are these illiquid, but they come with their own cash needs because there's a lot of risks associated with purchasing another property or renting out. Water heaters go out. In fact, I have no hot water at my house today. We'll figure that out later. And sometimes you have to jump in and put in capital, or maybe the money stops coming in. Maybe you have a renter who stops paying rent, or you have a renter who leaves and it takes you a while to fill your unit, and you're going to have to cover those expenses in the meantime. So, factoring in what risks you have in those scenarios is super important so that you know you can cover in the event you have something like that happen on a rental property as well. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about some rules of thumb of how we approach determining the right amount of liquidity and how you specify these cash reserves. Because what I find is it can be really elusive. People end up in one of two scenarios. They're either always finding a reason for all the cash and not accumulating any reserves, or the flip side happens where you feel like you can never have enough and you're living in this stress of what if I reduce that cash balance to make another investment or put it someplace else because what if this, what if that? And so the key is to very specifically identify how much you want in reserves personally. And then if you're a business owner, for your business as well. And that would apply to rental properties as well, as what do you need in reserves for each of these different components of your life to make sure that you are able to weather the storms that happen. And let's start on the personal side because that one's a little bit easier to identify because it's a little bit more standard on what people have going on. At bare minimum, I always want to see people have a month of cash reserves, a month of their general expenses. But ideally, I really like to see them having at least 3 months of reserves. At that point, some people, depending on how risky their job is, or especially if they're the only income earner in a household, we might want to see that closer to 6 months. But generally, 3 months is a great call. And then at that point, any additional reserves we can divert into something like a brokerage account where you're going to get more return on that money, but it's still pretty accessible in the event that something happens. It's a little bit more complicated on the business side. The first thing I'll say is that it's important for your business to have an emergency fund, if you will, just like on the personal side. And on the business, we want to take a good look at, the type of business. How do your cash flows work? What are your risks? Do you have employees? What's your payroll look like? Because one of the big challenges I see or pain points I see in people when they get into a cash crunch is the reality hitting them of, maybe somebody's not paying them on time or just different issues came up in the business. And it's that question of, I need to make sure I pay my people. And you don't want to be in that position where things slow down for a month and you're having to lay people off. So on the business side, it's really pretty similar to the personal side out the gate. Though, to be honest, when I work with my clients, I like to be very specific and look at the situation and determine based on what they have going on these numbers. But a great place to start is asking, what are my business expenses for a month? If no money came in, could I keep running my business for a month and keep everybody paid? And that's a great place to start. And working up to probably about 3 months would be an excellent place to start as well. And in a business, like with personal, we can also do some investing in brokerage account if you need to have some reserves in addition to that. And so these are just some thoughts to think about. What are the risks that are in your life that might need extra cash? And what should you have in cash so that you're able to fully focus on the things that are important in life and not be distracted with the stress of saying, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to make payroll? And be fully equipped to just launch forward into your next season of growth and do that confidently and not fearing about, the little bumps in the road, because we all know that they happen. Thanks so much for joining me and have a great day.